Well, it's a Sunday evening, and this is Interesting Ideas with Stan Houston, and we're trying to get ready for the week that is ahead of us. Lots of challenges, lots of decisions we have to make, and hopefully take advantage of some opportunities, just like you. We're trying to, hey, as the weekend comes to an end, and as we spend Sunday in reflection and rest and worship and getting ready, I usually like to take a time to be thankful and helpful and useful if I can, and be ready to, as we say, Monday meets the marketplace. I was amazed. It's one of those, why in the world hadn't I ever heard this before? This is an amazing story, and I'm a historian. I've taught history. I've read lots of history. And yet I find that there is an amazing story about a young black woman who literally has saved millions of lives. Literally, that's true, has saved millions of lives. And I have never heard the story. And in this Black History Month, I thought this would be a wonderful way to share the story in case some of you have never heard it before, like me, and I was amazed that I hadn't heard it before. It's also National Canned Food Month. Now, whoever comes up with these silly month ideas, I don't know, but I thought, that's good. Yeah, canned food's a good idea. And oftentimes it's well preserved and it's inexpensive, and even though it's not fresh, yeah, I'm okay with National Canned Food Month. But here we go. I want to tell you the story of a woman named Henrietta Lacks, and I'm just going to do enough of it so that you will run to your machine and that you will do a search, and there you will find the story far better than I can ever tell it. So let's do that today. I'm Stan Houston. This is an interesting story from Interesting Ideas, and the program begins right now. Okay, here is the story. And again, like I said, why haven't we heard this before? You know, this actually, okay, Black Lives Matter. This is one I really agree with. This was incredible. Now, here is the story as it goes. It goes to 1951, and a young woman, 31 years of age, a black African-American woman in Virginia, found out that she had cervical cancer. Well, she went to the few places in the area, Johns Hopkins University, where they actually would, this was the era of segregation, where there was a colored ward where she could be treated for her cervical cancer. Her name was Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks. And as they were treating her, a sample of her cells were taken out and sent down to the lab because that's what you had to do. And of course, as quickly as you could, you would try, before the cells died, you would try and get the information that would be helpful and useful from those cells. And they had been trying to find ways to keep cells alive out of the body for a number of years for scientific and medical research, but it just didn't happen. Well, for reasons still unknown, as best as I can understand it, and again, I want to do more research, they found that these cells from this Henrietta Lacks didn't die. In fact, every 24 hours, they multiplied. And they kept multiplying and multiplying. As someone said, it was almost as if these were immortal cells. And there, the gentleman at Johns Hopkins University was, oh my goodness, this is incredible. This is very helpful. This is very useful. We always need cells, human cells, to do medical research. And here we have from this woman, for some reason, her cells are growing by the hundreds, maybe thousands, every day. And to make a long story quite short, but not terribly too short, in effect, this man and John Hopkins, they didn't try and hold on to it. What happened is they started to tell their colleagues about this, and people all over the world started saying, well, could we have some so we can use it in our medical research? Well, and that is part of the story. Unfortunately, the cervical cancer took Henrietta's life. And so at the age of 31, on October 4th, 1951, Henrietta passed away. And nothing more was thought very much of it. But here's what happened. In effect, those cells have been used to do a ton of medical research, particularly in the area of vaccine. The polio vaccine was developed because these cells were then called HeLa, like H-E for Henrietta, and L-A for, lack, HeLa cells. And for, obviously, many years, these have been the primary cells that have been used in vaccine and other kinds of medical research. And like I said, the most significant one for at least my generation was when the polio vaccine was developed. Many of us, if you were of that age and stage, remember that polio, we had fears we'd catch polio and we'd land up in an iron lung and we would die. And I remember, the fear. There was a young girl in our church who got sick, and all of a sudden the rumor was, or at least it was thought at first, that her name was Diana and she had polio. And of course, all of the parents, that meant all of the kids in the Sunday school might have also been infected. Well, it turned out that it wasn't, but it was a frightening thing. And of course, for the most part, and one of the things that my Rotary Club has still in, for the most part, of course, polio has disappeared, except for a few places, primarily in some remote regions, I believe, of the Philippines. And there's still a campaign to try and make sure that this dreaded childhood disease, polio, never comes back again. But Jonas Salk and the polio Salk vaccine was part of the HeLa thing. Well, it was also when the pandemic took place, guess what was used to develop the vaccines? Right, these same cells, the HeLa cells from Henrietta Lacks, still going, still growing, were used in the ability that we had to do modern medical research. And one guy actually framed this in a wonderful story. He simply said this is, who has saved millions of lives and nobody even knows? Well, it wasn't nobody, but that was an interesting question. I didn't know this story. And I kept saying to myself, I actually taught as best I could for a white guy, but they asked me to help teach a course in African American history many years ago when they had that course in my high school. And there was a black instructor who had actually had some experience in that, but they needed someone to help. And I was young and I was interested, and so I was, particularly in terms of helping tutor some of the students. So the teacher would teach it, but I would help tutor them and go through their book and help them better understand this class in African American history. And of course, it wasn't just for the African American kids. We had a number of them, but they were by far a minority. But a lot of the other kids were very interested in it. It was a very popular course. And it's always been fascinating. One of the things that it was fun for me to discover is, do you know that the model for the idea of the Lone Ranger actually came, and this is the story, it's still controversial in Western mythology, but there was a real guy, and his name was Bass Reeves. And he was the toughest lawman in the West. He was known for bringing them back alive. He was, again, a little bit of your Bass Reeves, B-A-S-S, Reeves, R-E-E-V-E-S. And some people think that the idea of the Lone Ranger as the Western hero came from playing upon the myth and the reality of this black lawman. And of course, there were all kinds of stories, of the Buffalo Soldiers, the black soldiers, and the term buffalo was given because it was given to them by the Indians, who, because of their black faces, said they looked like buffaloes, and so it wasn't meant to be a pejorative. It actually turned out to be kind of a sign of honor, a sign of pride. But the Buffalo Cowboys, the Buffalo Soldiers, and as we've now discovered, there are even Buffalo Mountain Men. Many of these were, of course, people who were slaves who were freed, and they went out west to make their fortune, and a number of legends about the black soldiers and the black people who started and were part of the Western tradition. So I'd heard about that, but this story of Henrietta Lacks. Now here was the story, though. Millions and millions of people benefited from it, but John Hopkins didn't try to make money with it. But the problem was, neither did Henrietta's family, because in effect, by the way, she had never given permission for this sampling, and she had never given permission for it to be shared. Those kind of things didn't exist back at that time. Well, please look at the story, what they're doing now. They have made a point where her family is recommending, she had children before she died, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren now. As I said, she was born in 1920, so she would have been over 100 years old, and her family is still, and right now, the neat thing about it is her family is now very much involved, first of all, in helping tell the story of their wonderful woman. I said that my mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, telling that story. But now they actually have a part in deciding which of the projects can use her cells that are still going. And in fact, what was great is, in effect, when the first pandemic situation started to come, it was her family who jumped in right away and said, let's make sure that, in effect, kind of their words, let's make sure that mom is in the game. And that what she contributed obviously contributed to, again, the saving of millions of lives. There, I'm done. I hope you will look into it. It was inspiring for me as much as it was challenging for me, because I had never heard the story before. Now I have, and now I've shared it, and I'm going to share it with more. But again, you do say, why was this story not a normal part of the lore we all celebrate? But that's oftentimes the way things work. So I'm Stan Houston. Interesting ideas and an interesting story. Something to think about on this Sunday night. The woman who saved the world. The woman who saved millions around the world, and the story about her. So take some time to think about that. We are in the season, I believe, or where we're supposed to think about our lives and the meaning of life. We call the Lenten season. And it's good that we use the Lenten season to reform ourselves, and do so when we look at the examples of people who've done some wonderful things for us and with us. Hey, all the best to you. May it go well for you. We've got a number of interesting projects coming up, and we'll be trying to share them with you, hopefully to be helpful to you through this week, and we'll go from there. All the best and blessings to you, and thank you, God. Thank you, God. And thank you, family, for the life of Henrietta Lacks. Bye for now.